so that I could edit the email before I send it tomorrow. So a few things. There's been a lot of questions and requests for people to have more information about testing, like more information about who's positive, who's in isolation, etc. So I wanted to share my screen. I think I can do this. I have like a 50% success rate with this. So let's see how it goes. Oh, I can't do it because I'm not one of the hosts.
Hold on, just 1 second. Let me figure this out.
Okay.
I
can also just put the link in the chat, but
I just set you to co-host on it, so that that should allow it for you now.
Look at that. Okay. So what you'll see on my screen, but I also put it in the chat, is we updated the website with some more information starting today based on some feedback that we got from students, faculty, and staff. So you'll see that yesterday's testing event, which is August 25th, there were 195 rapid antigen tests. 3 were positive, which is a 1.54% rate. And antigen is not as predictive as the PCR test, but the benefit is that we get the results immediately. So we are doing a mixture of both antigen and PCR testing. And then based on some feedback from George and other people, we have broken down the total positive cases by students and employees instead of just whole collective. And we also have listed the amount of total people in isolation, and we've identified what isolation means. This website is going to look like this for a few more days. And then early next week, we should be able to have it live. We have been working with a faculty member, Michael Eskenazi, and the Institutional Research Office to create a dashboard of live data, as other schools have this, like UNC, Chapel Hill has one, et cetera, where you can click on it and it also shows the trends over time so that you're not just getting, like right now, if you saw yesterday, I'll just give an example. If you saw yesterday that there were 55 positive student cases and today you see there's 56, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's just one. That means that maybe 2 people came off and 1 person came on, because this is active. So it's hard to know that. So what this new data will show you is a cumulative report. Since I think the start date we're using is like July 28th, that's when most of the student leaders started showing up to campus. So it's what we're counting as like the beginning of the semester. It will also show you a community overall positivity percentage. So those data reports are much more robust. It's our goal to be as transparent with data as possible. Everybody has the right to know what's happening on campus. So we just have to get those reports tested. They're being shown tomorrow to a bunch of the VPs and the president for any additional feedback. And then they should go live on the website early next week. So I definitely wanted to share that because that's been based directly in a lot of student feedback. I also wanted to share that a little bit of information about conduct, and then certainly Lynn can share whatever she wants. And then mostly I just wanted to take y'all's questions because there's been so much happening with COVID. I could talk about it, you know, for a very long time. That's not helpful. I need to target what you guys want. As you guys know, because we sent out an email to the community, there were a few conduct issues. The students who were put in isolation for some of those incidents will be coming off this weekend. So the isolation number will be significantly declining after this weekend because there was kind of a larger bulk that went into isolation at one time. Those students are also in the process of going through the community standards process. And as was communicated in the email, anybody who we identified as a host of a large unapproved event has been interimly suspended pending their hearing. I think though that's not what I want to focus on, although certainly we can talk about that. What I want to focus on is that overall, the students have been amazing. Like, I don't know if you guys have noticed, like everybody is very, very compliant. Everybody's been fantastic. People have been telling their peers that they're uncomfortable. They've been telling us that they think maybe their neighbor is having a guest or that someone is not following the policies or they're gathering as a group. And that's been very, very helpful for us. So overall, the students have been really compliant, which is the one thing that will keep us completely open and in person, is if we can make sure that all community members, not just the students, are compliant with all the mitigation processes that we put in place. I lied, I will mention one other thing. So we do know that there were some student complaints regarding meal delivery and isolation. So a couple things happened with that. First of all, we did have large group who had to go into isolation all at one time, larger than we would have liked. And that happened over a weekend. And so we were trying to, when someone tests positive or someone has a large event, you have to do what's called tracing. And tracing takes a long time. It means that if we find out today that George is positive, we have to call him and find out everybody who he's been with over the last 2 weeks. Then if it's been close contact, we have to call all of those people, and then we have to determine who to isolate. So it takes a while. Also, there were some glitches with the spreadsheet that we created. So we were having to do a lot of it manually that we should be able to do, like we're able to now, automatically. So that did result in the delay of some meals for people. There also just wasn't a good understanding of what it meant to go into isolation for students. So I don't think they knew that, like, when we deliver lunch in the middle of the day, that's the one delivery of all 3 meals for the day. Or, you know, they didn't understand that if we put you in one of the apartments on campus, that apartment is not furnished. I mean, it has furniture in it, but it doesn't have like a lot, you know, other things in it. And so we've learned a lot as we've gone along, and most students have been very patient. We also put students in Plymouth apartment, which had not been, there hadn't been people in it for a while. So we had it cleaned, then we had it fumigated. I don't know if you've ever fumigated your house. If it works well, there are dead bugs because they killed the bugs. So there were some dead bugs. We've since cleaned better because some people went and checked in and said, why are there 2 dead bugs in my apartment? But so there are some things there that we've noticed with lighting that we need to fix. Like, there's no overhead lights. So if you were living there full time, that wouldn't be a big deal. You'd go buy lamps or whatever. But if you're isolating there, that's a big deal to not have overhead lights. So we're purchasing some lamps, those kind of things. Students who have communicated to us any concern with the quality of their meals or the quantity of their meals, we have worked with them to double the quantity of their meals or to change their meals. But it's not ideal to deliver meals in isolation, certainly. So those are just a few things that I want to mention. There have been glitches. We're not going to say that there haven't been, but I just want to say again, my reiteration of my gratefulness to the students and to George and the SGA student leaders who worked with us over the summer. And I just want to also mention, which I'm sure many of you are aware, my gratitude for my team and the Safer Stetson team, who has worked tirelessly all summer long to change every single process that we do and to move everything online. So it's been a lot of work. I think it's been mostly tremendously successful. And I think that we've also had some glitches, and we need to stay in touch with you about how to fix those and how to meet student need at this particular time. Lynn, stuff you want to add?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Lua, and thank you all students for having us here. It's so nice to see your faces, even though it's not in person, and to see so many of your familiar faces. That's what motivates us, right, and keeps us doing this hard work. So I think Lua said this, but I can't not say it, that overall, I think our students have been amazing and have really helped us to be able to be where we are right now. And even though we did have some difficulty, especially that first weekend, which I wish we didn't have, and I wish we didn't have to have repercussions for, overall, y'all are amazing. Like, I mean, just, you know, to me, the push right now is, how do we keep our campus as vibrant as possible while being safe, to honor the fact that most of you are having amazing behavior and really helping us out. And I don't want the behavior of a small group to negatively influence everything that you've worked so hard for. So I'm actually going to let you ask questions, because like Lewis said, I could just talk about all the things that we're doing and all the things that I wish had gone better all night. But I want to make sure that I'm addressing what you actually have concerns over. So also acknowledging, like, this is hard. It's hard for all of you, right? This isn't what you thought this year was going to look like. And I totally acknowledge that that's the case. And it's really hard for all of our staff. And just knowing the intention that we're trying to do the best that we can, but we want your feedback so we could do a little bit better. So I'm going to let you ask so we can answer.
Just to quickly add something first, I just put in the chat, but if you do have a question that you'd like to ask, just so we have a updated speakers list, just put your name in the chat, if you'd like to ask a question, and then Hannah will recognize you off of there.
Senator Cruz.
Hi, it's good to see everybody. It's good to see you, Ulu and Lynn. Oh, my mom's coming in. Okay, really quickly, I wanted to ask, like, what's the difference between quarantine and isolation? Are they the same thing? Because I get like messages from my constituents being like, I'm in quarantine or I'm in isolation. What's the difference? So I can still hear. I'll just be walking away.
That's funny. So there is a difference in the technical definition, and this is really confusing. But actually the Department of Health in Florida and the Center for Disease Control define them a little bit differently. Can you believe it? So the overall information that's important to know is that when you're quarantining, you're generally not sick. You've been exposed, you're not symptomatic. When you're isolating, you might be positive or symptomatic. But in regards to what we do to help support students when they're in either, it actually looks exactly the same. So we have to move students to a space where they're not going to have increased exposure to any other students. And a lot of that dynamic is about bathrooms, right? Because you all have single rooms if you live on campus, but bathrooms are really, really key. And then we need to take care of you while you're in that space. We need to get you food, make sure that you're okay. And then the clearance protocol actually doesn't relate to whether you're in quarantine or isolation. It relates to the reason that you're in one of the two. So for example, if you test positive in the state of Florida right now in Volusia County, that means that you have to wait for 10 days after that test took place and 24 hours of being symptom-free. So if you never have a symptom, 10 days, you do your 10 days, the 11th day we can clear you out. If you develop symptoms at any point, you've got to wait for at least that 24-hour mark. If you're in isolation because you had 6 symptoms, but you chose to never get tested, and I want to asterisk that choice because we do provide free testing. So a student can leave isolation to get tested or to go to the doctor, go to a medical treatment, anything like that. And so if you have 6 symptoms that match COVID, but you never ever get a test, then you're actually going to be waiting 14 days plus the 24 hours that you're symptom free. And then the last group, these are folks that we believe had direct exposure to someone who's positive, but they never develop a symptom. They don't get tested themselves or they test negative. And those folks are waiting for 14 days till they can be cleared. And the reason for that is because you can actually still develop symptoms or be contagious on that 14th day, unfortunately. So it is very confusing because even our own health structures in our country don't define them exactly the same way. And so I've actually sort of learned to focus a little bit more on the reason that the person is there. So positive, exposed, symptomatic. And in the past, we've also had people in isolation for travel, but that's not currently the CDC guideline.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Bautista.
Sorry, I have to figure out how to unmute myself. So I did want to ask, so at what point are we going to decide that students need to evacuate campus? Like, is there a threshold that we need to get to? Like maybe like a certain amount of cases or something? Like what is that contingency plan, I guess?
Yeah, so that is a fantastic question. And we're reevaluating and thinking about what that looks like on a pretty continuous basis. The Safer Campus Task Force, I know I speak for the larger group, we're very much in agreement that we don't believe in giving a number for that. And I know that for some people who really like numbers, that's hard to hear. But the reason for that is because we actually know a lot about how the virus is impacting our campus. And it's not equal. So for example, if we had a large group of faculty that were positive. That looks really different than if we have a large group of students. If we had a large group of students that didn't seem to connect to each other, that we couldn't trace back to each other, that would be really concerning, right? That might be a reason that we would move faster in a direction towards virtual. What we have right now is not that. What we have right now are very distinct pockets, almost all of which are identifiable. And so we might still reach a threshold where that's problematic, right? Like we can't run out of isolation locations. We need to have enough places to put people and isolate them. And a piece of that is that we always need to keep isolation locations on campus for people who don't have a car, right? So it can't just all be hotel. And then we have to have enough employees to work, right? Enough employees that are well, that can deliver food and make food and clean facilities and do those things that have to happen in person, public safety. And then our goal has always been that we would never completely evacuate the residence halls. We've actually felt pretty consistently about this in all sorts of emergencies, that we always have a population of student that doesn't have anywhere else to go. So, they are homeless other than Stetson, or they're an international student who can't go back to their home country because of the travel restrictions on folks flying from the United States. Even with the hurricane, right, the hurricane that was potentially coming, we had to think about what would we do with our students who are isolating. So even in a potentiality where we moved virtual, we would always have an option where residential life that residential life would maintain. It's just what exactly that group would look like is a question mark. So I'm always really transparent with students. I hope you realize that. And I've talked to some of you already, so you know this. When we had that weekend after the two events that are definitely larger than 10 people, there were moments where myself, Lua, Larry, Corell Hughes, we didn't know if we could keep doing this, right? Like in those moments, we were like, is this actually going to work? So we figured out that it can through a lot of hard work and a couple things shifting and finding those patterns, right? The fact that this is not, this is a pocketed situation that we believe we have our eye on, a couple of pockets, but they're pockets nonetheless. So we're going to keep evaluating whether we can continue with online, with classes versus moving to a completely online structure. The tiers are really helpful for us for that, right? So we're in tier 1 right now, but there is a virtual environment. We used to call it the virtual environment, but we're calling it tier 0 now. We kind of like that terminology better. There's something lower than what we're doing right now, right? Like, and I know these things don't sound good, but takeout only from the commons, right? You can't sit and eat in the commons. We close the gym. We can't have athletic practice. There's things that are more extreme than what we have now that could be considered if we needed to consider them. So I know that was a lot of answer, but I want you all to have as much context as possible.
Well, and I want to add something, which is that we also obviously keep an eye on what's happening in the hospitals and what's happening in Volusia. So in the peak in July, we met with a bunch of people from Advent Health to find out and make sure that we felt really, really good about the amount of hospital beds that were available. Because if there weren't enough hospital beds for a certain percentage of our population, we were not going to allow a lot of people to move back. But after meeting with them and understanding that they're part of a bigger network, and the fact that in Volusia, at least, this is the 3rd week in a row, I believe, don't quote me on that, I'd have to look it up, but I believe it's the 3rd week in a row when numbers have gone down. That's a good sign. So we want to get to that place at Stetson where we like flatten out and then we either hold there or slightly go down as the semester goes on. So, and to Lynn's point, the reason why we thought it was unsustainable a couple weekends ago was honestly human resource time. It was so much work to trace that many students and put them in isolation and feed them and figure out how to move them. It is a lot of work. And so what made me so frustrated about the unapproved gatherings was, first of all, it could have impacted student health. the second thing that made me so mad is many of you sacrificed a ton to be here. There are international students who quarantined in 2 different countries for 1 month in order to be here for Stetson. And if some party took away their probability to be here, I would have been really pissed, to be honest. And then the third reason is just that people underestimate how much pressure it puts on staff and faculty. It is so much work if there's an event like that. And I don't think that people went there knowing they were positive, but later we found out that there were people there who were positive. So that means we have to be safe and isolate everyone. So that was a lot of work. So if there was even decent positivity rate, but there were parties or gatherings that kept going at a part that we couldn't control, we couldn't stay in-person classes.
Okay. Senator Teodo Rescue, is that right?
Data rescue, that's okay. You're good. So I have a little bit of a hypothetical. This was kind of asked a little bit around, kind of bounces off the ideas of isolation. So let's say hypothetically, I was contacted and said I had close contact with someone who was positive. I got put into isolation, and then I end up taking a COVID test and it comes back negative. And let's say it's before those 10 days, and I already got the test at, let's say, day 5. Would I still have to hold out for those other 5 days, or now that I'm confirmed positive, am I allowed in the general population again?
Yeah, you'd have to hold out, and that's based in CDC guidance. That's not just our decision. That has changed, which is why I can understand why some people are confused, because there was some previous guidance about testing out of isolation or testing multiple times if you were positive and then testing again until you weren't, and that meant you could be out of isolation. But pretty much after studying that scientifically, they've decided that that's not the case. So you have to maintain the entire period.
Director Toledo?
Hi, my question has to do kind of with both of the previous ones, but it's about how you are contact tracing and how you're notifying students.
Yeah, great question. So the first thing we do is isolate a student if it's clear they need to be isolated. And we do that before we trace them because we don't want them to impact other people. We want to get them to their safe location and get them taken care of. And then we do the contact tracing. So we have a system that Lua mentioned earlier, which we had some technical glitches at the beginning of the semester, but it's actually an amazing system. And it allows us, we go down a list of specific questions that we need to ask. It also lets us pull information from other people. So like, for example, if I like to use Disney characters instead of real people because I don't want to wish anything on anybody. So if we had like Mickey Mouse who's COVID positive, it would already have in his file that Mickey might have had direct contact with Minnie and Donald, and then we know that we have to call Mickey and Donald. So it's a super helpful system. And so we ask questions about where they've been, but they're very specific to campus. So the law questions are different than the DeLand campus, and the student questions are different than the employee questions, right? So we need to ask you if you went to the Commons, if you went to the Hat Rack, and if you went to the coffee shop separately, right? Like you all think of those as 3 really separate things. So we break down all those pieces, and then we help to have a conversation about what is contact. So contact, meaning that the other person would have to isolate, means that you were for 15 minutes or longer closer than 6 feet. So for example, if you eat in the Commons at the tables that are for 4 people, but we restricted them to 2, and you sit across from each other with your masks off while you're eating, natural, if you have a 20-minute lunch like that, and one of those friends is positive, the other person definitely has to isolate. And so we know some of those spaces that are clear cut, like we had 2 students that they went running together every day, and one student is positive, the other student has to isolate. That's very, it's actually very high transmittal contact when you're exercising next to somebody. So we go through all those questions. The system pulls information about classes, it pulls information about organizational involvement, supervisors, so we're able to contact all of those people. And then the one additional element, which will not work until next week, which is unfortunate, but we're really glad that it's going to be up and running then, is that Everbridge actually also helps with tracing. So the Everbridge app that you all are doing on a daily basis, it has the ability to be turned on if a person's positive, and then it gives us all of their contacts that they had that were more than 15 minutes, closer than 6 feet, back within the incubation period. And it gives it to health service. It doesn't tell the student like, you know, hey, Donald, Mickey exposed you. It gives it to health service, and then health service knows they have to call Donald and tell Donald that they have to isolate because they were exposed. So in all honesty, we're farther behind in tracing than I would like. We have not been able to actually catch up completely, but today we are the best spot we've been in since Focus. So we're closer to the goal.
To go with that, who is the one that reaches out? Like, who is the one that calls the students?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the people who are tracing right now are the staff at health services. They're doing a lot of the employee tracing because we don't want other staff to trace other employees. That feels a little weird. And then we've actually trained a whole bunch of staff from athletics to help. Their load looks really different right now, right? Based on the competition plans being on hold for the semester. And so their athletic director, Jeff Altier, has worked with us to help have them all help with tracing. So it's actually a really large group of people who are helping to do that right now. We're also hiring a full-time lead tracer, and that person, they're going to do a lot of what I'm doing right now in coordinating the tracing. So I'm really thankful to have someone help. And then they'll be doing a lot of the direct tracing and follow-up with students. Every time a student switches to positive if they were in quarantine and they switch to a positive, meaning now they're isolating, we have to go back and talk to them again and do an even more depth analysis. So that, you know, it takes time and we want to get it right, and people have questions and we want to answer, you know, those questions. So those are the folks doing the tracing right now. The CDC has been really open to the fact that it doesn't have to be medical professionals. And I'm just going to add one other thing there, is that our relationship is such with the Department of Health that they actually don't retrace our people. Very rarely will they actually recall one of our people, and it's usually because they had a contact off campus, like maybe their student teaching. But they actually trust the trace that we do, and they use that information.
Senator Wright.
Hi, I was just saying, is there any like protocol or discussion about either there's going to be like a phase 2, or if there's going to be like stricter restrictions in place?
Yeah, so there definitely is a phase document online that you can see, and we would love to move to phase 2, but we are not there now. We're still seeing, you know, not a huge amount, but a steady stage of positives, which honestly with this size population is about what you would expect 2 weeks into school. So we've always said that we would reassess after Labor Day and kind of see where we were. Even after Labor Day, we're not sure that we're moving to phase 2. There's still, like I said, there's still too many people in isolation. There's still too many, you know, steady stream of positives. If we can get those to slow down, like has happened in the county, which I believe that we can, then the Safer Stetson Task Force will make a recommendation to the President's Cabinet to pivot to phase 2. I'll add, they meet and assess every week, and then the leadership group of VPs meets twice a week. So we're meeting every Tuesday and Friday, and they're meeting every Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Moore?
Just a real quick question. I know there's probably like a reason for this, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Like regarding the library study spaces, like in the commons, like we're in tables of like 4 and we can take off our masks and like eat there, but like some of the study spaces like in the quiet area, like it's either about like 6 feet apart or like maybe even 12 feet, like some of the tables. And I know that some students, like the library is like they have a hard time studying in their rooms because it's just like distracting. And like for me, the library is like my place to go. I was like always there. So I just didn't know how that would work, or if there would ever be restrictions taken off of that, or just, yeah.
Yeah, the library is such a great place to study. And if you haven't seen it, we've also identified a whole other host of classrooms, et cetera, that can be used as study spaces. Not ideal. I know you still want the library, but we predominantly did that because commuters were telling us, like, I have an online class and 10 minutes later, I have a in-person class. So where can I sit and take my online class? So we found a bunch of rooms that we can clean that they can be in. The library, the part of the concern with the library is that people stay so much significantly longer than they do in the commons. But I also would encourage a few of you as SGA reps to meet with the head of the library. The library doesn't report to me. Sue Ryan, the dean of the library, is fantastic. And I think she'd be very open to your comments and questions. So I would encourage you to meet with them. But there was a lot of concern from the library staff about students coming back because they know how many love to be there and they know how long you like to be there. And that's just a lot of what we're watching is what's called viral load, right? So if you are next to somebody for 5 minutes and you're both facing forward and you have your masks on, your viral load, even if one of you is positive, is really, really low. If you share a bathroom, you hook up with somebody, the viral load is very high, it means that you'll have more likely get the virus. It also means that there's a potential that you could be sicker from it because you're getting more of it in your system. And we've noticed this on campus. We've noticed that there are some groups, so these little pods, who are much, much sicker because of either sharing bathroom space or spending more time together. And then there are some people who test positive who don't get sick at all. And so their main concern was the amount of time and the amount of people who are in the library. But I think you guys should meet with them.
Yeah,
Okay,
and just an example, we did have a positive student who through tracing identified that they were in the same spot in the library for 3 hours, right? So that does look really different than 15 minutes in the commons. And then of course, you have to take your mask off to eat, which is why we did so much to make that as possible for everyone, including the extra space up in the Stetson room, because it's a non-option, right? And it's just physically not possible.
Okay, thank you.
President Alderman?
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. First one is what facilities and how many are being used for isolation or for quarantine for students if they have to be moved out of their living space?
Well, so I think the point you made is right? Like if they have an individual bathroom, they can stay in their living space. But if they're having to be moved, the hotels but Lynn can share more. She knows the exact locations.
Yeah, so Plymouth is the space we're using the most on campus. We have students in isolation in all 3 of the hotels we're using. So the Courtyard Marriott, the Hampton Inn, and the Comfort Inn. There are spaces on campus that are much easier to isolate people in. And then there are 2 spaces on campus where we had to isolate everyone who lives in that space because of the number of positive cases that we'd already had in those spaces and the way the bathrooms are set up. So like, for example, in UVA, because there's 2 bathrooms, it's possible to have a positive person stay in the one bathroom and have the other 3 people who live in the apartment use the other bathroom. So not as ideal as having your own personal bathroom, but much better. And people don't have to physically move out. There's a couple of other random places on campus where we have individual apartments. Like there's an apartment in Carson that's currently not occupied by a staff member that normally would be. And so we've been able to isolate there. And there was a Catalyst house that wasn't otherwise occupied, and we've been able to use that space as well. And then, of course, we keep our eye on, if somebody moves out of U-Haul is a great place to isolate someone. So we keep an eye on spaces as they move around that are ideal for isolation versus spaces that are harder. So obviously, Gordis, Smith, Carson Hollis is hard. And then most of the fraternity houses as well are hard because of the bathrooms.
Awesome. My next question is, how big in terms of staff size is the meal delivery operation? Like, how many people are working at that?
So it depends on the day and how many people I can get. It is a no-touch process, so you just leave the meals outside the door. So we've actually just been approved to have student employees assist with that process as well, which will speed it up. Because right now on campus, it's public safety plus whatever additional faculty and staff volunteers I can get. So usually for on campus, it's somewhere between 2 to 4 people. And for off campus, it's somewhere between 1 to 2 people for the hotels. If you have 2 people, hotels take an hour and a half to half an hour each to do. If you only have 1 person because someone didn't show up or felt sick so they didn't show up, which they shouldn't, then it takes closer to 2.5 hours to do all the hotels. So the people at the end of that are then waiting for their meals. So we did get approved for student employees. I just heard in an email today that they're supposed to start next week or the week after. So that'll be great because it's a decently easy job to do. It's a great service to the institution, and then we'll be able to speed up the meal delivery process. In the meantime, it's been amazing that public safety does this every day. And then there are faculty and staff volunteers from literally all over the campus, including the weekends. The weekends is a little harder to get volunteers sometimes. Public safety is doing on campus, but off campus hotels are a little harder. So for example, like this last weekend, Jen, who works in my office, she did all hotels all weekend.
Awesome, thank you. And then my last question is kind of more of a technical one. So it's all right if there's not like an exact answer. I follow with the city of DeLand on their Facebook page every day. They put an update of the number of cases that are in the city of DeLand. I was just wondering, do our positive cases contribute to that number, or do we kind of fall like kind of outside of that, or if it's like a don't know kind of thing, it's fine too.
No, we're in the DeLand cases and the Volusia cases.
Yeah, we have to report every positive case to the Department of Health within 24 business hours. We don't have to report all of the folks that are isolating, but we have to report every positive. And so the city of DeLand gets those numbers from the Department of Health.
Awesome. Thank you.
Senator Cologne.
Hello, Lua and Dean Schoenberg. I'm just wondering real quick. So in case a commuter tests positive or anybody in the Stetson community tests positive, I'm pretty sure it will be reported, or what will be the method for them to inform the university as they're supposed to? Because that will help you guys to do all the tracking and everything, and it will speed, things. So what's the process on that?
I so appreciate your question. That's super helpful. So the stetson.edu/reportit website, we're really encouraging funneling of reporting through that site because we don't want people to have to remember 100 different places to go. So that's a website where you can report any concern within the community, a concern about a friend's mental health, a conduct violation. We did create 2 separate forms, one for if you have a COVID health related concern or you know that somebody else does, and then a separate one that's for COVID related policy violations. I know some of you are RAs, so you totally know this, but you don't have to use the right form. If you use the wrong one, we'll figure it out. It's okay. We just want you to report it. So students are absolutely reporting in that way. My favorite thing ever, not just about COVID, is when we get 5 of the same report. That's actually really good. That means you all are being great bystanders. You're looking out for each other in the community. So that is the easiest way to report because it goes to the whole on-call team and to this key group of people who are doing a lot of the tracing work. So for example, any of those reports that you fill out, any single one, it instantly goes to my email and it instantly goes to Larry Carell Hughes's email. One of us is always on call. This is how it works, you know, regardless of COVID. And we see that and we get our on-call team to respond. Also right now, because the volume is so high of those reports, Nicole Curry, who a lot of you know, she's the great front desk staff at Student Counseling Services. She's actually entering each of those reports. She's transferring it to the system that I mentioned earlier that Zoe asked about for tracing so that we know that we need to call that person and trace them next. It's saving us so much time. You can also call health service, and I know that some people prefer to do that because they want to talk to a health professional. You might have to wait to do that. So the benefit of filling out the COVID form from the stetson.edu/reported is less of a wait, and also after hours and weekend coverage, right? So if you fill it out at 3 a.m., I'm not going to see it, I'm going to be honest, but I'll see it like at 7 a.m. when my 4-year-old wakes me up. So we're checking those pretty constantly. So that is definitely the best way to go about reporting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator Bautista?
Yeah, I just want to ask one more question. So if students no longer feel comfortable with staying on campus, do they have the option to move out with a refund, or does the refund only apply if the campus needs to evacuate?
I know of some students that have worked with us because they're uncomfortable, but I don't know 100% the right answer. So I'd rather get the correct information and send it to you all as opposed to give. Larry was going to come tonight too, but he has kids and he's been working all the time too. So Lynn and I said, why don't you not, and we'll take it. So he would know, but I'll find out.
Yeah, and that question actually made me think as well. Students can go home to isolate or to do their quarantine. That's definitely an option. So if they prefer to do that, and obviously it has to be close enough that they can drive. The only asterisk is that if they have a fever or they don't have the mental acuity to drive, then we can't release them. The Department of Health won't allow us to release them to drive home. And if you're positive, you can't drive in the car with someone else, right? So that's the only little hiccup in that. But some of our students are choosing to go home, especially those that live pretty local. They'd rather do their time at their home environment.
Chair Finkelstein?
Well, thank you guys for coming out and, talking a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes, so to speak. I just have just two questions. So my first one is what is exactly community exposure? I know that term's been being thrown around a lot. And I think a couple people have also received emails about community exposure. So just a little bit more clarification on that. And then the second question is, just coming tonight, do you have any ideas or, expectations of how SGA can continue to support you guys in your efforts, just moving forward and throughout the semester?
Well, I definitely have some ideas for the second one because I was like, I'm not coming to SGA without some stuff for you guys too. So Lynn can definitely answer the community exposure piece of it.
Yeah, and I love that you're asking these questions because it shows me that you all are paying attention and you're reading what we're sending. Community exposure is actually the CDC term, meaning that you did not have direct contact. You did not have the level of contact that you need to be put into quarantine, but you did have some contact with someone. You did come close to them. And so the easiest, the one that is happening the most right now in tier 1 is that you are in class with them. So I got to hand it to you all and our professors. So far, every student who's been positive, who's gone to class, when the professor shares with us the seating arrangement and the student talks to us about their experience in the class, there's no direct contacts, unless they were their friend that they had a direct contact with outside of the class. What everyone is telling us is that we're maintaining more than 6 feet distance, we're wearing masks, we're not touching each other's space. We're really spread out. So we have not needed to quarantine someone who is in class with someone only for that reason. But we do send a community exposure notification. So if I was in a class with someone who was positive, I'm going to get a community exposure email. It's not going to tell me the class. It's not going to tell me the student, but it's going to say that you had a community exposure. So the Department of Health in Florida actually doesn't do that. They don't communicate to that level of individual. And I'm going to be honest, we had a lot of conversation about whether we should do it or not, because when we do it, it certainly brings up questions and it makes people have maybe a little bit more fear and concern. But the reason that we decided to still do it, even though we don't have to, is because our community at our size, we know what those community exposures are. You know, we know each other. We know who's in your classes. We have the ability to do it. And so we decided that we should, because what if a student in that class has a high risk health condition, or they're going to stay back at home with their family and someone's pregnant? We wanted the student to have the control. So I work with a student who I've worked with for a long time, who's fantastic, who has a compromised immune system and just absolutely loves Stetson so much that he insists on still going to 2 of his classes in person. But what we talked about is if he gets one of those community exposure emails, he should stay home, right? The average person, the average Stetson student, it means that you watch yourself and you be careful, but it means something else for him. So I'm still, open to the argument that maybe we don't send those, but we have decided that it's in the best interest of the community. So another example besides class is when we move into the next tier, you'll be able to have student organization meetings at a small size, right? And so let's say, you all met as SGA in a very large space, very spread out, and one of you was positive, then everyone in SGA would get that community exposure email. Same for a sorority or a sports team.
I think there was confusion because it used to be called direct and indirect, and the language changed. So as the CDC or the Department of Health changes language, there are times when we're changing language so that it stays in alignment with them. I was going to say so it's less confusing, but that's not less confusing. It's so that it stays in alignment with the CDC. To your other question, I actually thought about that before I came, and I thought, what also could I use from SGA, who are like our partners as leaders on this campus? And I had 2 things, and Lynn could maybe tell you more. One is building community. This is like a super weird time, and especially for our first year students. And some of them we didn't have the welcome back bash. We didn't have the, we're not having those things. If I were a more introverted first year student, I might be really struggling to make friends. And that's part of the responsibility also of Res Life. And it's also part of the responsibility of clubs and orgs and student development, campus vibrancy. And we had our org fair today, but also it's something I really would love SGA to think about, because if these students don't feel really engaged or a part of the Hatter Nation, it worries me. I worry about it. Lynn knows, because she got an email from me at 2 in the morning where I woke up and I was like, what if we had all these online events for them this weekend? And I worry, especially about the first year students and their sense of community. So that's one thing that I would love for you guys to kind of think about how you might be able to build some of that in this interesting environment. And some of that could be tabling or things set up in the Cub just at a safe, process, but I worry about that a lot. The second thing is being information sharers. There's a ton of questions, which there should be. This is totally weird. You guys have lots of questions. Our staff has lots of questions. And so half of what Lynn and I's job has been is COVID response. The other half has been communications, because it's a lot of questions. And so you guys, what you're doing today, and then sharing this with your constituents, having your constituents read the Safer Stetson, asking them to attend the webinars, sending them parts of Safer Stetson that are information, being able to be an information source before people think oh, we're hiding data, or it can get very negative very quickly. And that's not who we are as Hatter Nation. We are sharing information. You guys are very transparent. We're very transparent. We're a business, sure, but we're also like a family. And the more you can help us share that information, the better. Because one thing that my staff is already super tired, but the one thing that'll just kill your day is having a student, parent, faculty member come at you and say you don't care about students. Like that, I'm just done then. I'm like, why do I even do this job? I'll lay down in Woodland. So that's where it could be really helpful. And that sharing information is also sharing your expectations of the community. The fact that you, and everybody's been doing an amazing job at this, so that's why this is last, is that people have been saying like, and it took me some guts, and I work here. When I walked past some students yesterday to say, hey, can you pull up your mask for me? Or, you know, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. Or you hear there's going to be an event and you shut it down and tell people that that's not okay with you. Not that it's not okay with the university or it's against the rules, but it's not okay with you. So I think those are the two things I'd ask for assistance with is community building and communication.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, I completely agree with what Lua said, is that empowered bystander piece, which Lua mentioned. But I think that's what gets us through this, and it is great to file a report the next day, and I appreciate those of you who've done that. But it's not the same thing as breaking it up in the moment. You know, from the two events that we know of that happened that were reported that we were able to trace, right? There's multiple positive students at both of those events, which only we know about because we did really fast tracing, and then we were able to get people to the Centric Care rapid testing that's free for students. And so we were able to figure out the chain of events there really fast. Otherwise, I don't even know how much worse that would have spread, right? And so there was a lot of students there that were uncomfortable. They told us that afterwards, but they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything in the moment, right? They didn't say they were uncomfortable. They didn't call public safety. And I'm not saying to be tattletales, and I believe in fun, so I'm not saying don't have fun. But I think it's not just you all, but spreading the word to others, right? To speak up when those things happen is the most important thing to me.
Senator Cruz?
Hi, yes. I thought Lana was first. Did she go?
I think so, right? I'm totally blanking here.
You want to go, Lana? You can go
Sure.
first. Yeah.
Thanks. So I have a question. So if someone is living off campus, like their own apartment or house, but in DeLand, and they test positive and they feel that they could benefit from something, food or whatever, that Stetson is providing, is there anything that Stetson can do to help those students who are, you know, not technically living on campus, but are still in DeLand?
There are some things we can do, and there are some things we can't do. One thing we can do that we've been working on, and it'll be done tomorrow, is we've made a commuter COVID guide, which I think was really important for both students and their parents. We didn't really have a guide that explained to you like how parents could help order you groceries or how you could order your own groceries. We didn't have a guide that explained how we've worked out services to do pickup laundry. We've worked out services to get you things from the library or things like technology. We've worked out a service where if a student is in quarantine or isolation and they don't have a laptop or they don't have good Wi-Fi, I gave out a Wi-Fi hotspot today to a student who's in isolation off campus. So they just didn't even know sometimes all the stuff that they do have access to. Now, certainly, Lana, it's easier for us liability-wise because my staff aren't really supposed to be driving around town and dropping stuff off or whatever. It is better if there's a friend who can bring those things to them, their mail, a computer, and dining has said that it's okay for a friend to be allowed to pick up their meals from the cafeteria and bring it to them. But if we got in a situation where that absolutely wasn't the case, we'd work with the parents to figure out what we could do for that student. So, and there are some faculty and staff who have offered to cook for students who are living off campus. So there are a handful of students who got meal deliveries at their door, homemade meals this last week. So, but it isn't the same level of what you get if you're on campus. That is true. And so, yes and no, I would say, but we at least need to do a better job of communicating Because once I talked to a parent and told her like, well, this is how you could do groceries and this is what we do with books, she was like, oh, she hadn't thought about that. She was just paralyzed with the fact that her first year student has been gone like 10 days and is in a house with 3 people and they're all positive. Like she was just freaking out, you know? So we certainly will work with every single student that we can. But as far as us delivering meals around town, that hasn't been something we've been able to do. But with every student who needed something, we figured something out.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now Senator Cruz.
All right. I just thought of something kind of like extreme, but I was just thinking. I was like, probably not, but I was just like, it's a question. I should still ask it. Would y'all ever consider like not shutting campus down, but like maybe like a curfew of some sort? Because like I feel like there's not a lot like that's happening on the low on campus, but maybe there's a lot of like going to the bar in downtown DeLand, or it's like that's something you just can't control. I was just curious, like have you guys thought of solutions like that, or if that even would be feasible? Because I know it's like a lot of extra work, you know.
Well, we'd work with you guys on like what conduct seems possible. Our approach always is that you're adults and that we should treat you like any other adults in the community. Now, adults in the community have been asked to not gather in gatherings, to socially distance, to wear their mask. This is not particular to Stetson. You know, I had so that I feel like once we start to get into more of that, like for example, even the telling students that they cannot have another student in their room. We've talked about this. That's sustainable right now because we just got back, but we don't know how sustainable that is before people are like, Aaliyah lives next door to me, I want her to come over. You know, I mean, so the tighter you make the rules, the more people are going to try to hide that they're breaking them. Not bad people, but just like, I already hang out with Aaliyah. Why does it matter if she comes over? And then what happens is the roommate on the other side sends us an incident report and says, I swear Aaliyah's in that girl's room all the time. Why does she, you know, so it's a balance with conduct. You know, it would have to be pretty major for us to say that we're going to put in a curfew, because I would say, and you guys could correct us if you're wrong, you know the students way better than we do. You are the students. It still feels like there's just a really small group of students who's making bad choices. It feels like the majority of the students are really trying to be very conscientious because they value their own and each other's education. That's what it feels like to us.
Thank you.
Chair Finkelstein.
I promise this is my last question. And I think I already know the answer to this. If it's perfectly fine if it's the answers, I don't know. But just out of curiosity, how far or close are we away from moving from tier 1 to tier 2?
More than a week from now, and hopefully less than a year from now. No, Lynn, Lynn will have a better answer than that.
That's not a bad answer, but so there's never any possibility to move out of tier 1 before Friday, right? Because tomorrow, Thursday, will be the mark of us having been in classes for 2 weeks. That's right? The days are all smushed together in my brain. I can't even exactly explain. And so we needed to at least have that 2-week period of time, because that's the 2-week incubation period that people have come to campus potentially with their germs, knowingly or unknowingly. So there was no way it could happen before then. But we need to stabilize the numbers that we're at right now. We need to be more stable than we currently are. So I think what Lewis said is at least a week is the truth. There was never a way that it could happen before Friday. But I think based on where our numbers are, we've got to at least give it another week to see what happens. And I'm going to be honest, now I'm like holding my breath every weekend, right? So last weekend was so much better. And actually, that is something I wanted to say to you all. We thought about sending out an email to acknowledge that it was so much better, right? Like we sent that other one that was a little harsh from us. We're not usually that harsh, that maybe we needed to send like a good job email. But I actually asked a bunch of students and they're like, don't do that. Like, because we don't want people to let up, I guess, right? We don't want people to think that everything is fine and that we can let down the guard. So
and you guys would know, again, you would know better than us, but Labor Day weekend is coming up, and some people have class on Labor Day, but some people don't. If a bunch of people travel that 3-day weekend, we're back to square one. That means that everybody's coming back from being around other people. The same thing happens in the spring with MLK weekend. It's like we get started and then there's a long weekend. So definitely something we're going to keep an eye on. Stetson is about community. So it is weird to stay in tier 1. The faster we can safely get to tier 2 is the fastest I want to get safely to tier 2, because that's, as a business, that's what our ROI is community and relationships. So tier 1 doesn't serve us great because we're not some community, I'm not saying all community colleges, but we're not a community college where most of our students are commuters or taking classes online at a rate. That's not who we are. So I totally get the question and the desire for people to move to tier 2. I want to move to tier 2 too, but we're definitely not there yet. It needs to, like Lynn said, it needs to stabilize. And then we know that if we do that, if we're not stable enough, numbers will go up because people will be hanging out in larger groups. So we need to feel really stable and ready for the fact that, and who knows, we could move to tier 2 and move back to tier 1. I don't really know.
Okay, last question is from President Alderman.
Yeah, mine's just more or less a closing one. Is there anything else that you guys would like to share with us? Hear any more information that someone might not have asked the right question to bring up, but just really anything else?
I just want to encourage testing. So we are doing testing once a week on campus. Every other week, there's a large group of students that are mandatory to get testing, like our resident assistants and our folks that are student teaching in the schools. So there's slightly less appointments on that day. But the thing about our relationships with our testing agencies is that they'll give us more tests if people show up and come. So we wanted to have more tests yesterday and they limited us to a number, and like they're our partners, we've got to work with them, right? There's limited tests right now in the state of Florida. But we were actually max capacity. We had people who wanted to sign up and couldn't. And so they're going to give us more tests the next time they come. So keep coming to the testing events and also spread the word that if you don't make one of those, you can get free testing at the Centric Care locations, any Centric Care location. As long as you bring in the forms.
I mean, the only other thing I'd share is just like, watch out for yourselves and each other, both health-wise, but also mental health-wise, community-wise. It's really stressful. And then on top of that, I think we talk a lot about COVID, but to me, it's one piece of a much larger thing that's happening in the United States and in the world. And so it seems like a time of revolution, not evolution. And there are these times in history that are like that seem very dramatic, right? Both potentially and internationally. I'm not talking about the United States itself, politically, racially, and environmentally. I mean, there's a hurricane that could potentially hit. We have students who are from the area where the hurricane is about to land. We have students who were displaced because of the tornado. We have students in, California near the wildfires. We have it's just an interesting time in the global landscape. And I think that there's part of that that's very curious to me, like how we will individually and collectively learn and come out the other side of this. But there's a part of it when you're in it that's just stressful. And so I think you guys, continuing to kind of hold the community a little bit like we're trying to through this time. Like Lynn and I have both been on call. I've been on call since I was an RA when I was 18, and next week I turned 45. So that's a long time to be on call. But I have never worked an on-call situation that's so long. Like it's always like an incident for the weekend and then it's over and then I cry and then I sleep. But this one just keeps going. So I think for many of us that, there was a shooting of an African-American man yesterday. It's a lot on the community, and it's a lot on members of the community who don't always look like all of us or some of us. And, so knowing that your constituency is not just you, knowing that there's still lots of things that are happening in the world that are impacting people. And I don't want you to take that on as your full responsibility or put pressure on you, but I think all of us just being a little more aware, a little more empathetic, a little more checking in on each other, a little more making sure that everybody's okay is always good. And I'm grateful for you serving at this time. Leadership in 2020 is not for the weary. So thank you.
Thank you both for coming, for answering all those questions. And that whole time I was trying to think if I had anything else for my report, and I've got nothing else. So end report.
Okay, report of the Vice President. My report is just that we will be using Zoom for the rest of the time that we are online. Now moving on to the report of the Director of Finance.
Yes, good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all, and thank you again to Lua and Lynn for coming. It's always great to see the administration really taking an active part in answering the questions of our constituents. Today for the Director of Finance report, I want to give an update on something I've been working on a little bit with my committee since the summer. And if you are on the Finance Committee, this may sound familiar, but I'm seeking the recommendation and input from all of Senate on the course of action that I'll take soon. With that, I want to get specific input from you all on two pieces of information. The first is that with this new environment that we see with COVID and the effect that's having on student life, we want to really give student organizations more of a choice and freedom in how they can spend their finances. And we're taking a real close look at the travel and food categories. And I think the course of action that we want to take to enable the student orgs to be able to do more with themselves and for the community is that we want to enable the student orgs to give back any amount of money that they feel they cannot reasonably spend between now and spring back to the financing pool that all the money comes from, and it would go back into funding requests. Now, let's just say this organization, as an example, Organization A, they requested $2,000 in programming and $1,000 in food. All their food events, they can no longer have, and half of their programming they could no longer do. So they have the option to give back all of the food, and they have the option to give back half of their programming. The second part that I want your input on is being able to move from the travel and food categories, being able to move that money into student programming so that the community can be better benefited, and so that, again, we're not limiting our organizations, we're enabling our organizations to be able to do more within reason. The idea is that I'm still trying to find the sweet spot, but I'm thinking around 35%. They can have the option to move all of the travel budget, and they have the option to move 35% of food into student programming. And they can do this option. We're looking at working with the orgs. Our goal is around the middle of September. And then there'll be a second period in November where they can choose to move that money back if they miscalculated something, or if the situation changes and they think they can host more food-based events in the spring. We want to give them more flexibility. So just to summarize what I would like input from you all, and we can go into a Q&A period where you all can raise your hands and give that input, is that we want to enable student orgs to be able to give back any money that they feel they cannot spend. So, it won't be reflected in the next budget process where they receive a budget and they're unable to spend it. And we want to enable student orgs to move money from travel and food into student programming. So I guess I can moderate. Daniel, do you have something to say?
Yeah, so just a question on that. So if you were to go with option A, where the student orgs can give back, would that be out of all categories? Let's say that programming has also been affected in some way, and each category has been affected to different amounts. They can give from every category, right? They can decide how much they want to give back. It's not like they won't be able to give back programming money or anything, right?
Yeah. So it's not mutually exclusive. They can give back money from any category, and they can move money from travel and food into student programming.
Okay, perfect.
So if they feel that, they no longer require money for flyers because they're moving their programming virtually, they can give that category back. They can give any amount of money back that they want.
Thank you, sir.
Aaliyah?
Would you recommend that organizations like not take anything, like not take everything out of one particular category just in case? Just in case, like hypothetically, like by the end of the year will be moved to like tier 3, so like some of the stuff can be used again, or will there be like, if as needed, will there be like another process like this where like money can be returned?
Yep. So because of everything going on, I would feel very confident in saying that an organization should move travel. If a travel opportunity does come up in the spring or there is a virtual registration, we're looking into creating a very streamlined form that the Finance Committee can approve at a normal weekly finance meeting. Instead of going through a whole funding request process, that those funds can be allocated. So my personal recommendation would be to move funds out of travel, since those will be the most restricted. And I don't really foresee the school lifting travel restrictions in the near future. In a category like food, I really want to enable organizations to be more creative in the events regarding food. If they can have prepackaged food or catering that's prepackaged, I think they can still reasonably hold that event if it's a pickup kind of thing. But again, it's going to require a lot of input from the school with that organization working with administration to see what they can reasonably achieve. So if they don't feel comfortable in retaining those funds, or if you're comfortable that they can effectively spend those funds, they can either give it back or they can move it into student programming. And in my experience being on the finance committee and being the director of finance, it's always been our goal to never limit student programming, because that's what the greatest effect for the greatest amount of people come from student programming.
Thank you.
Josh?
Hey, John Michael. I like option 2. I think that's a really good option. My concern comes from option 1, because we just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So I like the idea of funding requests, but my concern is there. So I think it would work perfectly if like we're in tier 3 and there's a lot more, the restrictions were a lot more lax in the future. But if that's not the case, what I'm concerned is, well, necessarily 2 things. Those funds not being used when we pull them or pool them for next semester, or those funds being used but not being used efficiently because organizations feel that they have to use those funds in order to secure the similar or same budget that they secured for this year. So I'm wondering, if that's, let's say, hypothetically speaking, if we're in maybe like still a tier 1 by next semester, would there be maybe the possibility of paying like those funds back to the student population, or putting it towards maybe like a COVID-19 relief fund or something like that?
Yeah, so paying it back to the student population would probably be the hardest option, because these funds are not collected from this billing process. The funds are determined from a certain Stetson population. If the population this semester is 3,200, the funds can be locked in at 3,000. And they lock in the amount of funds so that the budget for our organizations all the fixed expenses isn't fluctuating all the time. Because graduate students, there are some staff positions whose salaries come from these funds as well. We can't have it fluctuating. So the school collects the money, and then we agree upon how many students at what rate, and that's the total pool of funding. So a more viable option, which is what we've done in the spring when we were having this discussion as well, is moving those funds into a COVID relief program, moving the funds into other projects. I plan on reapplying for Director of Finance, and one of the main focuses that I want the Senate to have is to have a target on what projects, as a very big picture projects, that we as a Senate should be looking at, so that going forward, if there are a lot of funds left over, which I imagine there is going to be a significant amount. I don't see a scenario where there won't be a non-significant amount of funds remaining, that we can actually use those funds effectively to help the students get back to the community and to further projects that would benefit the school the most.
All right, thank you.
Clyde, did you have something?
Well, no, I was just going to say that I think these options are pretty good. You know, this is basically one of the things that we, you know, use as a hallmark of the Finance Committee is getting this money allocated. The senators that did take part, John Michael, myself, and our other great committee members that took part in the allocation, this was actually a very different allocation this year. It was obviously, everybody had to send in their presentation. None of it was in person. So we really mulled over their asking, that like what they asked for. We mulled over the money they asked for, their records of, you know, how much they've spent in the past, and all of that. So, you know, now that we've been hit with, you know, COVID being, because we based a lot of what we gave and what we tried to allocate off of kind of everybody returning to a normal type year. And now that we've returned back to a, you know, tier 1 and back to what we're going through, definitely these options I think will be fantastic for a couple of reasons. First off, so it doesn't hurt the organization in the future when their flow chart shows, hey, they didn't spend anything, they didn't spend really anything. So when those numbers are shown years down the road, it doesn't kind of put a you know, it's always just good to have the asterisk next to fall 2020 to tell the future senators that you know, we had extraordinary circumstances. So I definitely think that these are sound courses of action, and it's just a great way to help preserve the money that is paid in and the money that gets allocated, so that we can kind of keep the pool moving and give the orgs some room to breathe.
Exactly, I couldn't agree more, Clyde. You know, in drafting this proposal and taking a look at some of the proposals, I was talking with exec on my committee over the summer. I definitely like this new one a lot more, because in no way, shape, or form are we limiting organizations. We're giving them more options so that they can be more successful. And I think you know, we're on the right track in really helping our fellow students. You know, taking a lot of uncertainty and taking some of that uncertainty out of the equation, so they have more time to plan and they can reasonably allocate the funds for their organization as they want. And you know, if they don't feel comfortable holding on to those funds, they have the option to give it back, so it can be put to better use, and so that it doesn't affect them in the future. If there's no more questions, I can end my report. Does anyone have any final things they would like to speak about? Okay, great. Thank you for listening and for the input. I really appreciate it. I'll be working with Zach Beaver in the coming week to solidify this new policy, and I'll also be taking input from some student orgs as well before we start sending everything out. And of course, I'll keep the Senate in the loop. I really value all the feedback that you guys gave today. Thank you.
Director of Marketing.
Hi, everyone. I'm trying to think of things to say. I want to say thank you to everybody who has spread the news about elections on Instagram. I have gotten a lot of people reaching out in the SGA email and also in the direct messages that were referred to from you guys. So I really appreciate that. For the ones that did share the news, and if you haven't, declarations close at midnight. If you think somebody's going to be a great senator, please share the word. So that way we have a good election coming up. But besides that, thank you. I have nothing else to say.
Director of Internal Operations.
Yes, so wait, hold on. Okay, yes, thank you all for coming. Keep coming to this, please. Obviously, realistically, attendance-wise, I'm just kind of going off of honor and faith here. So please show up. On another note, earlier in the semester, last semester, I was talking about some constitutional amendments. So a couple of things. I personally am of the impression we should probably just rewrite the whole Constitution. I know we have a constitutional amendment going through, and I also have some like half-written constitutional amendments that I might just try to like throw at the legislative committee before this weekend, and then hopefully if we can get them on the floor for our last Senate, but just some really trivial stuff. But besides that, I'm of the impression we should just be rewriting the whole Constitution. And I will be pushing whoever the next president and vice president are to do that. So, keep a lookout for that. Keep coming, guys. Keep engaging with people. And other than that, go Senate.
Okay. Chair of Diversity and Inclusion.
Not here.
If I may, she's not here right now, and I think next goes on to it's special committees is next. She'll be under committee report later.
So moving on to reports of special committees, election committee.
Hi, everyone. So like Zoe said, the declaration is closed tonight at midnight. I'm going to be following up with all the candidates for an important email. So if you applied to run for a candidate position or president VP, please keep an eye out for your emails. I talked to George about setting a date for the town hall for the president and VP, and it's set for September 3rd. And so I'll be reaching out to you all to find a specific time that you all will be able to meet, and we'll iron out the details of how that's exactly going to work. I'm also going to be meeting with Kristen Graham and Bonisha to talk more about elections and just get the advertising going for election day, and just pushing that all out to students to make sure that they vote. Yes, I think that is it for me.
Okay, now moving into special orders, we will be doing the confirmation of Senator Paolo.
Yeah, so really quick, everyone, just to jump in here. Vacancy is opened on the electoral committee, and per the Constitution, that spot needs to be filled within 2 weeks of the vacancy occurring. And so following Lishna's recommendation to me, I am nominating Senator Paolo Teodorescu to the spot on the legislative committee, electoral committee. Let's get that right. This will proceed as a normal confirmation hearing usually would. So it will be introduction from Paulo, questions. He will lead the discussion and a up or down vote. So take it away, Paulo.
Alrighty. Real quick, can anyone hear the fan or no? Cool, awesome. Well, hi everyone. My name is Paulo Teodorescu. I am a senator from the class of 2023, a sophomore, and I'm also a political science major. So one characteristic about myself, I'm always someone who's always striving to do better and try and reach a sort of perfection. And while I understand perfection is an intangible goal, it's something that kind of motivates me to try and become more involved, to try and do more, and to try and use the diverse palette of skills that I've been learning throughout my college career and try and implement them into such positions. So my goal, if I am, appointed into this position, is to increase participation amongst the student body in voting. And not just in making people join our organization, make people run for elections, but also to make sure that there's enough participation with the student body in voting in these elections. The way I kind of see it right now, especially that we're in an election year, it's very important that we're at least training students to be voting right now. And even though we're having a student government election right now, and while it's not, as the same caliber as, let's say, a state or a local, even a federal election that we're going to be having this November, I think it's important that we're at least making people get introduced to what voting is, how to take voting seriously and such. And that's something that, what my commitment is to be in this committee. As well as having open communication, making sure that people know what the student government is, will know what elections are, and making sure that they're ready to either be able to vote or being able to join our organization through our election process. I'm not the type of person who's going to hear and, list off a bunch of skills or try and list off a resume, because that's just not classy. So I just think one encompassing overarching theme is just the different diverse skills that I've either amplified or different things that I've learned throughout my year already here in college through experiential learning, whether that's an on-campus job or other organization, other commitments that I've so far done, being able to collaboratively work with not just students, but faculty and administrators. And I believe that those skills that you learn, those different various levels of communication can translate to here in the student government, whether that's working with all of you, working with our exec board, working with our faculty and administrators to make sure that we have a seamless election process. I'd like to close off with, if I am able to win your trust over, I will promise you I'll use 100% of the effort and skills that I have acquired throughout my so far 1 year and a few weeks into the sophomore year right now, as well as being able to continue the really great legacy that student government has here at Stetson, and making sure that our election process is going to be as seamless as possible and just as successful as it has always been. Thank you.
This will be moving into a question period, and this can go the same way that we did for questions before. If you have a question, just put your name in the chat, and you will be recognized.
Senator
What are we doing
Hendrick?
last name now?
Motion to go to a vote, or motion to move to discussion and a vote.
Is there a second?
Second.
I can't.
Okay, it has been motioned and properly seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those nay. Abstain. Okay, it is an opinion of the chair that the ayes have it. We will now be moving into a period of open discussion.
You want me to leave right now?
You'll just drop out of the call for a bit. I'll tell you when to come back.
Sounds good.
I guess use the hand raise feature for this to speak. The reason I just keep recognizing myself is because I can't raise my own hand in this, unfortunately. But I think Paulo is an excellent choice for this. He's proven himself to me over the last couple of months to be a hard worker, and I think he would do very well in the electoral committee coming up.
Senator Cruz?
So how does this exactly work? Is it one person, or is there going to be multiple people on this committee? Is Lishna stepping down, or would he be like helping Lishna?
Yeah, so if I may, this is for the electoral committee. So there's the electoral chair, who is Lishna, and then underneath her, there's 2 members of the electoral committee.
Gotcha. Have we found a second person?
Yes, so there were originally 2 people. It was Josh and Zoe. Josh has vacated his seat on that, and constitutionally, that seat needs to be filled within 2 vacancies. So I'm recommending Paulo to fill the seat for the remainder of this term. So he will just serve until the end of, he'll basically be serving for about 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
The next electoral chair and committee is chosen.
Understood.
Senator Hendrick?
Yeah, again, I just same second President Alderman's statement. I serve alongside Senator Teodorescu for the class of 2023. We're in honors together. He's always very talented, hardworking, and he'll clearly put forth good effort in this position. And I recommend that he serve there.
Senator Colon?
Motion to end open discussion and move to voting.
Second.
Second.
It has been motioned and properly seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Any abstain? Okay, we will now be moving into voting. Please register your votes.
So using the yes, no feature on Zoom, just click on the participants button and you should see that pop up at this time over the next like 30 seconds, because I don't know if how long those stay up for. Please register your votes. Any blanks?
Leave it up, and I'll take a picture of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a count here.
Or I'll count it, either or.
I can see how many. So I guess
also see how many.
I will give people another several seconds to register their votes. Any vote that is not counted, I suppose, will count towards an abstention. Senator Haugen, I must ask, is that a vote? Okay, thank you. And Senator Wright, I saw that you had, you're using one of the reactions on Zoom. Was that a vote or?
Zoe, you're a director, you don't vote.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oops.
All right, and make sure that if it's a no vote that you register that as well.
Are we supposed to be seeing something on our screen?
No, it'll just be showing up on the, I don't even know if you guys can see the vote totals.
Yeah, you want to open up the participants tab. Just click on that, and then you should be able to vote and see everyone else's.
Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
If I'm reading that correctly, that looks like 17 votes in the affirmative, with no votes in against, and one. Trying to count how many abstentions there are. Seems like one abstention, if I'm correct. How's it looking, Joe?
It's good. Just make sure you subtract Zoe's vote.
Roger that.
I appreciate the participation, though.
Zoe, if you click the yes button again, it'll take it away.
I don't want to take it away. He's on my committee.
Fair enough.
I already got it taken down, so I mean, Hannah, if you'd like to make the announcement of the actual vote number, it's 16.
Yeah, with 16 votes, it passes. Congratulations.
I will get him back in the call now. So
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Second.
Was there one abstention?
It appears that there was one abstention.
Okay.
You coming, so.
Woo! Yay!
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Woo! Congratulations. Okay, that, I guess, ends that part of that. Cool.
We have no new business or unfinished business, so we will be moving on to chair reports. Does anybody have Chair Diadio's report that they would like to read?
I do. Sent it to me very quickly. She just said that her bill is almost complete. And report on her behalf.
Okay. Now moving on to the Chair of Academics.
Hey everybody. So Pet Act, I got to work on that. Been a week, so I've got to get it to John Michael. So John Michael, I'm just putting you on notice. I'm getting you that bill. Other than that, expect Pet Act to be presented next Senate. All I can say is it's been a really one heck of a senatorial year. But I'm glad we were able to accomplish what we accomplished, and it's been fantastic being with all you guys. End of report.
Campus life.
Hi everyone. I do not have the report right now, but I just hope you guys stay safe and take care. End report.
Finance.
Just to be clear, is this the last report for this term, or is there one more?
There will be at least one or two more.
All right, cool. So I'll start writing my speech for the last committee report now, just so that I could prepare the waterworks for the very last meeting. But there's no report at this time. I think we covered everything earlier, so no report.
Okay, we will now be moving into a period of open discussion. President Alderman.
Yeah, I just something that I forgot to mention during my report. Thank you to everyone who came and helped out during the involvement fair earlier today, with an in particular huge shout out to Clyde for holding down the fort for I think at least 2 hours. Major props to you. We got a lot of people signed up for the elections through that, and it looks like this election is going to be a big one with a lot of people coming in it. So good job, everyone, and major thanks to Clyde and to everyone else who helped out with that.
Senator Kolchinsky.
Hi everyone. Another Hillel event this Friday, 6 p.m. We are baking challah this Friday. So if you want to watch us or even participate at home in baking challah and talking about Shabbat, join us. You can DM the Hillel Instagram for the link and we can get it to you, or you can just text me. Yeah, hope to see you there.
Director Leontis.
Yeah, I had a question that someone might know the answer to. Does anyone know when the recycling bins are going to be returned to residence halls? Because, I got this whole recycling facility in my room, it's just mountains of water bottles. I'm trying to get rid of it. I don't want to throw it out, but I'm running out of uses for them. I already have this whole aquaponics, hydroponics thing set up. I'm using these water bottles for new cause. I opened up a whole water bottle fashion line. Like, I need to get rid of this stuff.
John Michael said reduce, reuse, recycle.
Exactly.
John Michael, you have an aquaponics facility in your room. You're growing fish and food in there?
Yep. All through reclaimed Zephyr Hills water bottles.
What he did over summer. It was
Reclaimed. Wait. Reclaimed water? What? Elaborate that on that a little bit?
We can do that after the meeting, but I just want to know when these recycling bins are going to come back.
I think a swift email to facilities could sort that out for you.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Worked for me with the solar panels, so.
Also, you can switch to a filtered water bottle. It's better for the environment. Just saying.
Oh, I have something real quick. Just want to let everyone know, you could probably see that I have been recording this whole thing just because I wanted to make sure, especially with the importance of what Lynn and Lua had to say, that our constituents are able to do that, are able to see this as well and hear it word for word. So I'm actually going to be uploading it onto a YouTube account in the next 24 hours or so, and then we'll figure out from there what to do with it to make sure that it's accessible for students. Kind of inventing it as we go along. Senator Haugen, I believe I see a question from you, for me.
Oh, and it's not a question. I'm waiting to be recognized.
Oh.
Senator Hagen?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Okay, it has been motioned and properly seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Okay, it is in the opinion of the chair that the ayes have it. We are now adjourned.
Have a good